Hello and welcome to Northern Nightmares, your home for nightmarish stories throughout Canada and beyond. I'm your host Andrew, and today I'm taking you back into the UFO world. Not only does this story contain a weird object in the sky, it also has one of the first documented alien abduction stories. Stories involving beings from other worlds have been in human history since man drew cave paintings. It's only been the last several decades that aliens have been a pop culture phenomenon, from movies, TV, books, and even video games, for example. We've been fascinated with the idea of having neighbors in the vast universe, it being little green men from Mars, or even having a buddy like Chewbacca from Star Wars. However, before the fantasies came the fear, and in the 1960s, fear of beings abducting us for unknown purposes was real, especially in America. For Betty and Barney Hill, they had their own struggles. Being an interracial couple during the civil rights movement, they were generally accepted by their friends and family. They kept their lives private and avoided situations with racism best they could. However, an alien encounter would make avoiding the public eye near impossible. On September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were heading home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire from vacationing in Montreal, Quebec. Around 10:30 p.m., heading south on State Route 3, the Hills were enjoying the quiet drive home with their dachshund dog, Delcy. This road was known for being quite rural. In the late evening, they were the only ones driving down it, when suddenly the Hills noticed a light in the sky. Betty, thinking it was a shooting star, while Barney believed it to be an aircraft. However, they noticed it started to get bigger the longer they stared at it. The Hills figured they'd take a little break to stretch their legs and take Delzy for a little walk, and also get a better look at whatever was in the sky. Looking at it through Barney's binoculars, Betty changed her thoughts on it to a flying saucer, as she claimed her sister had seen one several years before. They noticed this object, the longer they stared, started to descend closer to them, and this was enough for them to take off. Betty, having more focus on it while Barney was driving, said it became orange and looked like it was the planet Jupiter the closer it got to them. Eventually, Barney would stop the car again around a location called Indian Head, and it took his binoculars out to get another look, and had his handgun this time just in case. He would describe it as wingless, cigar-shaped, and flashing lights were visible with red, blue, green, and yellow color. Barney was unable to stop looking at this thing, and at some point, he started walking towards it. However, Barney would later describe that he had seen something that made him afraid for his life. Running back to the car, Barney sped off, trying to get away from this object. The Hills would claim the object was at least 100 feet off the ground, just grazing the top of the trees. They also started to hear a beeping sound that sounded like it was bouncing off their car, similar to the sound of a tuning fork. The feeling of calmness would wash over them, and they claimed at this point the memories were hazy. As they continued to drive away from this thing, they had noticed they'd been driving for almost 2 hours, and the object was nowhere in sight. For the Hills, it felt like they'd been driving only minutes from when Barney first stopped to get out, which would be between 10:30 and 11ish, let's say. Where did the 2 hours go, and why couldn't they remember any of it? Passing a street sign, they realized they were just outside Concord, about 35 miles from where they originally were at. Having finally arrived home sometime around 5 in the morning, an ETA that should have only been a little after midnight, the weirdness from this incident continued. Betty, believing their luggage might have been irradiated from the craft, left them outside on their porch. She also noticed her dress that she was wearing was ripped in multiple places and hung it up in the very back of her closet. Barney noticed the tops of his best dress shoes were badly scuffed, and he had a weird feeling in his groin area, which, a couple years later, a perfect circle of growths would appear. Also, both of their watches permanently stopped working, and Barney's binocular strap was ripped. There were also several weird circles embedded in the trunk of their car. The couple would later have different views on the ordeal. Barney wanted to just forget it and move on. However, Barney would have to deal with Betty being so determined to get to the bottom of this bizarre mystery. First, she contacted her sister, and she claimed to have seen a UFO several years ago. Her sister asked her neighbor for advice, and he suggested checking the car over with a compass. This would see if there was any unusual magnetic energy. The compass worked fine until they got to the trunk, which had the weird circles. The compass ended up spinning out of control. Betty believed something outer-worldly happened to them, but Barney just tried to forget it, believing the compass was just broken. Now, I will mention these two were very credible people. Betty earned a BA degree from the University of New Hampshire, was a social worker and a civil rights advocate. Barney was a World War II veteran and later worked for the United States Postal Service. Both were members of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP for short. Betty also had 3 children from a previous marriage, and Barney had 2 as well. So these were the kind of people not to come up with some hokey story of UFO encounters. A few days later, Betty got the idea to contact the local Air Force base, going through multiple channels till she found someone that would listen to her story. Walter N. Webb, a Boston astronomer and NICAP member, would be the one to start these interviews with the Hills. Before I get into that, let me quickly explain what NICAP is. The National Investigations Committee of Aerial Phenomena was a civilian-ran organization that would bring their investigations to the U.S. Congress between the years of 1956 and 1980. They were similar to the other group I mentioned in episode 3, APRO, but on a much larger scale, and their findings ended up going to Project Blue Book as well, which I also mentioned Project Blue Book in that episode. A little refresher on Project Blue Book: that was the secret department in the US government that investigated UFOs between 1952 and 1969. Maybe one day I'll do a multi-part series on everything UFOs, a deep dive into Project Blue Book, the real story of the Men in Black, and everything else you didn't know. But let's get back to the story. Webb interviewed the Hills for about 6 hours on everything they could remember. Barney believed he suffered from a mental block, and there was a lot of stuff he didn't wish to remember. However, he did describe when he was looking at the craft through his binoculars, he could remember seeing figures aboard it, figures that weren't human. Webb determined that they were indeed telling the truth, and the incident happened as it occurred, except some minor uncertainties like the missing 2 hours. Approximately 10 days after this, Betty started to have wild dreams about the incident. This went on for a solid 5 days. It seemed like her subconscious was trying to show her the suppressed memories. I'll be getting back to those details on that shortly. On November 25th, 1961, the Hills were visited again by Nightcap members C.D. Jackson and Robert E. Honman. They were very interested after reading Webb's report, and both men had many questions, and the Hills recounted their story, which has been said stayed the same in both interviews. What fascinated the men the most was the missing time they experienced. The Hills' last location before the encounter was at a hotel in Colebrook, New Hampshire, where they stayed the night before from driving home from Canada. The drive from Colebrook to Portsmouth is only 178 miles, or 286 kilometers, and should have only taken them 4 hours to get home, instead of the several hours. The Hills had no explanation for the missing time. This is considered a common phenomenon by ufologists. The Hills asked the men if they could recommend any medical treatment so they can move past this, but the only thing that was suggested was hypnotherapy. It would be another 2 years before the Hills ended up seeking the hypnotherapy, as they tried their best to go back to a normal life. During the next couple years, the Hills attended many private sessions with their church group. One of these times, on November 23, 1962, Captain Ben H. Sweat of the U.S. Air Force was a guest speaker and had an interest in hypnosis. The Hills recounted their story for Sweat and even asked him about these thoughts on hypnotherapy and maybe unlocking their suppressed memories. Sweat advised them it's worth checking out, but to avoid amateurs like himself and to seek out a professional. Their hypnotherapy sessions started sometime in January of 1964 and lasted for about 6 months. Their sessions were with Dr. Benjamin Simon. His goal wasn't to prove aliens were real, but to help the Hills unlock their suppressed memories. Simon was a well-known psychiatrist with an extensive experience in the field of hypnosis. Betty and Barney were always separated when their sessions were conducted so they wouldn't be able to change the facts. Their description on how things went were very similar. Some differences on mostly just how they reacted to the situation. Also, these sessions did help with the repressed memories. However, I wouldn't say they just remembered that night, but instead relived it. As they were fleeing the craft, they were eventually stopped in the middle of the highway by a roadblock with a strange group of figures. Both were taken out of the car and carefully led down the road, which they would end up back at the craft. They both described the figures with slanted eyes, big heads with a thick, wide chest, and the rest of their body being skinny. Also, dressed in black uniforms, some wearing hats, and when not speaking to the Hills, they spoke in a weird, garbled language. They were both led up a ramp and into the craft, and separated into different rooms. Before I tell you their accounts of what happened when they were separated, let me explain a common theory of the figures. What the Hills described is an alien race known as the Greys. They are the most common extraterrestrial everyone knows. The giant head with narrow, black, voidless eyes, and usually skinny. It is said the Greys are the most aggressive alien species, as they have experimented on us the most over the other alien species that have supposedly visited us. Now, this is just scratching the surface, to which is a giant rabbit hole to the alien theories. But like I mentioned earlier, I do have a huge series planned on that later on. Now, let's start with Barney's take while inside the craft. Barney said he was led into a clean, white examining room and placed upon a white, sterile-looking table. He tried to keep his eyes closed as he was terrified, but it was hard not to see what was happening. There were all kinds of gadgets on the walls. He could feel many hands all over his body examining him. There were fingers in his mouth, and they placed some kind of cup gadget on his groin. This gadget is what's thought to have caused the growths to appear later on. They took samples of hair, earwax, skin, and even a semen sample. He was eventually led back out and taken back to Betty. One of these therapy sessions were released many years ago. I've listened to the whole thing in preparing for this episode, and it's terrifying. I have here a little sample of what Bernie's sessions sounded like. Let's have a listen. Bernie describes what he sees when he's looking at the craft through the binoculars. Also, I will mention the quality isn't great compared to nowadays. It does sound like it was recorded off a potato.
But I know this creature, this leader is telling me something.
He's telling you something. How? How is he getting it to you?
I can see it in his face.
Do you see his lips move? Yes?
No, his lips aren't moving.
Yes, go on. He's telling you.
And he's looking at me.
What did he tell you?
Stay there and keep looking. Just keep looking and stay there. And just keep looking. Just keep looking.
Could you hear him tell you?
Oh, I gotta pull these binoculars away from my eyes. Because if I don't, I'll just keep staying there.
Could you hear him tell you this?
Oh, no, he didn't say it.
You felt he said it.
I know.
You know he
Just
said it.
there, yeah. Just stay there, he's saying to me. It's
All right.
pounding in my head. Just
All
don't
right.
pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength.
All right. All
Pull
right.
them down. Run! Pull these binoculars down and run. God! It says my God, give me strength. I gotta get away. Oh! Betty!
All right, all
We
right.
gotta get away, Betty!
All right. Calm down.
I'm driving. I
Calm
gotta
down.
get away.
A little terrifying, eh? Like I mentioned earlier, for Bernie, he was reliving this situation all over again. Now, let's go to Betty. Betty was led into a similar room where they examined her and took samples of her, but never used the cup gadget on her. They brought a giant needle and they placed it in her navel. She resisted, but the leader came over and tried to calm her down by saying it would take the pain away. The leader told her it was a pregnancy test, and after they inserted it into her, she was okay. The leader and Betty talked for quite some time. One question was why Barney's teeth could come out and not hers. She explained he had dentures from a previous injury, probably from World War II. She thought it was funny that they couldn't fathom the concept. She also explained to them what aging was: years, eating, and even vegetables. She asked the leader could she take something home to remember this experience to prove it happened, and the leader told her she could. Betty picked out a book with weird language that she couldn't read. The leader also brought her out to a table and showed her what she calls a star map. She asked what all the symbols meant, and the leader explained that they were trade routes and current expeditions. Betty would even ask where their home was, but the leader said, "Before I tell you, do you know where Earth is?" Betty, unable to answer, didn't receive an answer back. Betty was led back down to Barney, and the two were led back down the ramp to the car. When the other figures seen Betty's book, they protested to the leader about it, and the leader took it back. Betty, putting up a fight, demanded it back, but the leader said, "We don't want you to remember this," but Betty declared she would not forget. They were both led back to the car, where they would eventually continue their drive home, which we already know took much longer. Before I continue on, here's a clip of Betty's session, which was about her needle experience.
So, I lie down on the table, on my back, and he brings over this, how can I describe it? They're like needles. There's a whole cluster of needles, and each needle has a wire running from it. So then they roll me over on my back. And the examiner has a long needle in his hand. And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it. And he said, just a simple test, it won't hurt me. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. It's just a simple test. And I don't know, it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And he said, no, it won't hurt. And he sticks a needle into my navel. And spits it. And I'm crying, and I tell him it's hurting, take it out. And then the leader, he goes over and he puts his hand, runs his hand in front of my eyes. And he says, I'll be all right. I won't feel it. And all the pain goes away.
After all these sessions, Betty and Barney Hill were more convinced now that something truly weird did happen to them, but they decided to still keep it private and move on with their lives. They continued their group sessions with the church, but in 1965, a reporter named John H. Luttrell joined one of their sessions, and somehow he acquired the recordings. He went and published stories about the couple for a week, mostly painting them as crazy people. The Hills went public to tell their side of the story, and with their story is still debated today. Betty met with an astronomer in 1965 and drew out what she remembered from the star map. Now, at this time it was confirmed that we had none of these constellations in our skies, so it believed to be nothing credible. However, several years later, Betty brought the star map back to the astronomer with telescopes being and proved it was now confirmed that constellations did exist, called the Zeta Reticuli system, which is approximately 39 light years away. Barney passed away in 1969 to a stroke, and Betty never remarried. Betty would spend her life as a major member of the UFO community till her passing in 2004 due to lung cancer. Because of their story, no one still knows what happened to them on that night. This story eventually led to many books and movies, one that involved James Earl Jones playing Barney. Even Barney's granddaughter, Angela Hill, is a UFC fighter, and she believes her grandparents' story, and even just recently made gym gear with aliens on them. The Hill story will live on until we get proof of the existence of other life in the universe. And that's the famous story on Betty and Barney Hill. When you look up into the sky, I hope you stare and wonder the big question we all want an answer. Are we truly alone out there? If you have any stories you wish to share, feel free to email me at northernnightmares@outlook.ca. Follow me on Instagram and wherever you listen to podcasts. Next week, I'll bring you another serial killer story. This one is a famous colonel of the Canadian military. Also, after that one, I'll be getting ready for the mid-season finale before Christmas break. So I'll see you soon. Sweet dreams. And remember, nightmares are closer than you think.